The Stephen Colbert team went into this January 6th committee hearing room without press credentials after they were denied their application, and the Capitol Police addressed their presence in the room because they weren't allowed to be here. This is what Fox News reported at the time. They said, quote, when Capitol Police spotted members of Colbert's team at the January 6th committee area, they were schooled away and left the House office building. Okay, so first of all, they knew they weren't allowed to be there, and they deliberately entered a restricted area. Put a pin in that word restricted, because we'll be back to that phrase restricted area. It's kind of key to what a lot of the January 6th defendants are facing right now. Also worth noting, while we're talking about this first entry, this first unlawful entry of this Colbert 9, Colbert's insurrectionists is what I like to call them. The fact that they got into this area, this January 6th committee hearing area without credentials, the fact that they breached this restricted area means that these nine people, these Colbert's insurrectionists, were actually closer to members of Congress than anyone on January 6th was to a member of Congress, despite, AOC's Instagram lives detailing, trauma. And, she said she was almost raped and almost killed, despite her lies about what happened. The Colbert 9 actually gained closer access to members of Congress illegally than anyone on January 6th did. So just so we're clear on that. So once the Capitol Police kicked Colbert's team out of the January 6th committee hearing area, they actually entered another building, the Longworth building. Now, both times that they gained entry, they did not breach doors. They did not break windows. They were allowed in because they were given access. Who gave them access? Great question. They were given access by the staff of Democratic members of Congress, including, by the way, January 6th committee member Adam Schiff. Adam Schiff's staff members helped Colbert's team gain access, even though they weren't allowed to have access. Now, Colbert's team was told that in order to be in the congressional office buildings, you have to have an escort with you at all times. And it's your responsibility to make sure that you have an escort. Otherwise, your presence in this building, regardless of whether you broke a window or breached a door, your presence here without an escort is unlawful. You would be deemed in a restricted area where you're not allowed to be. Again, put a pin on that word, restricted area. It's my favorite phrase of this entire episode. So what did these staff members of Colbert do? What did these 9 people do while they were in the Longworth building? Well, they went to the offices of Kevin McCarthy, the minority leader in the House. They went to the office of Ohio Congressman Jim Jordan, and they went to Congresswoman Lauren Boebert's office. And what did they do at the offices of these Republican members of Congress? They pounded on the windows. They pounded on the doors. Fortunately, the Republican members of Congress weren't there. They weren't present in their offices, but the attempt to hound these members of Congress, including pounding on their windows and pounding on the door, that's what they were there for. That's what the Colbert 9, that's the behavior the Colbert 9 engaged in. Around this time, the escort of these people disappeared. They left. They left. The escort left the staff members of Stephen Colbert unattended in the office building, which rendered their presence, the Colbert 9's presence, unlawful. They were now in a restricted area, and they had been told that you must have an escort with you at all time. And they ignored this. They didn't care about the law. They disregarded this guidance intended to keep members of Congress safe. And they stayed there and they began to film skits that involved attempting to harass Republican members of Congress. So again, fortunately, we're not present, but the intent to harass them was there, and certainly they acted out on it by pounding on windows and doors. So it was at that point, at about 8:30 at night, that these 9 people were arrested by Capitol Police, and this was about a month ago. This was a little bit over a month ago, a month and just a couple days ago. And in that amount of time, about 4 to 5 weeks, that's how long it took for the charges against these individuals who were in a restricted area in Congress where they weren't supposed to be, for the charges to be completely dropped. They were only held in jail overnight. They weren't thrown in the DC gulag. They weren't put in solitary confinement. They weren't held for well over a year, deprived of their due process rights. None of that. They were let go the next day, told to show up in a month to be charged officially for their trial. And before that happened, the U.S. Attorney's Office dropped the charges.